The evening in Lusaka was warm, and the sky carried that golden glow that always made Amara feel at peace. She stood before her mirror, smoothing down the fabric of her emerald dress, the one she had saved for a night as special as 5 years of marriage felt like a dream worth celebrating, and tonight was the proof of it. As she fastened her earrings and added a touch of red lipstick, her heart fluttered with excitement. She thought of Chike, her husband, the man she still adored just as much as on the day she said yes. In her mind, she whispered, "We made it through storms, and we're stronger for it." Outside, the garden was already alive with laughter and music. Strings of lights twinkled against the night sky, and the sound of drums blended with soft jazz from the speakers. Guests were arriving in colorful attire, their smiles wide, their arms full of gifts and bottles of wine. The atmosphere was warm and joyful, the kind of evening where everything seemed touched by magic. Amara walked out to greet the guests, her dress catching the light, her eyes shining with happiness. She floated from group to group, laughing, hugging, making sure everyone felt welcome. But all the while her heart kept glancing back toward Chike, who was surrounded by old friends. She admired how handsome he looked in his navy suit, how his laughter carried across the garden, how people always leaned in when he spoke. In that moment, Amara felt proud to be his wife, proud of the life they had built together. As she watched the candles flicker on the tables and the music swell, Amara felt certain of one thing. This night would be one to remember. It was their 5th anniversary, and to her, it felt like the beginning of forever. The night was supposed to feel perfect, but soon Amara noticed something she couldn't quite explain. Chike wasn't himself. While everyone laughed and shared stories, he kept pulling out his phone, his eyes fixed on the screen as if it held more importance than the celebration around him. She tried to brush it off at first, telling herself he was probably answering work messages. He had been busy these past few weeks, and maybe the pressure was weighing on him. Still, something about the way his eyes barely met hers sent a small sting to her chest. Amara reached for his hand once, hoping to pull him back into the moment, but he slipped it away casually, pretending to adjust his jacket. She forced a smile, trying not to let anyone notice. The band began to play a cheerful tune. Guests swayed to the rhythm, yet she felt the weight of his absence even though he was standing right there. She wanted his attention, his smile, his warmth, but all she got was the glow of his phone reflecting on his face. Whispers soon floated through the crowd. A couple of women near the buffet leaned in close, murmuring while their eyes darted toward Chike. Amara caught fragments of their words, little pieces like "so distant," and "he seems distracted." She laughed it off loudly, as if she hadn't heard, as if the comments didn't cut through her like thin glass. She told herself, "It's nothing. They don't understand him like I do." But deep inside, unease stirred. She kept watching him, hoping for the familiar look, the one where his eyes softened when they landed on her, the look that always made her feel like the only woman in the room. Tonight that look never came. He scrolled. He laughed at something on his screen. He barely glanced at her. The music, the lights, the chatter of friends, it all carried on, but for Amara, the air shifted. It was still their anniversary night, yet a shadow had crept in quietly, settling between her and the man she loved. She told herself not to overthink it, that tomorrow he would be himself again. But as the evening went on, a quiet tension wrapped around her heart, whispering that something was wrong. The laughter in the garden was loud and cheerful when the gate opened again, and a new guest stepped in. Heads turned almost at once. She was tall, striking, the kind of woman who made an entrance without even trying. Her black dress clung to her figure, her heels clicked softly on the stone path, and her smile was polished, confident, deliberate. She moved as if she belonged in the center of attention, and in that moment, the music itself seemed to slow for her. Amara's eyes followed the shift in the crowd, but what caught her off guard wasn't the woman herself. It was Chike's reaction. His face lit up in a way she hadn't seen all evening. His phone disappeared into his pocket, his posture straightened, and his eyes locked on the woman like the rest of the room had vanished. Amara felt a sudden chill in her chest, sharp and cold, though her lips still curved in a polite smile. She told herself to stay composed, to breathe, to remember this was her night. Chike was quick to cross the garden and meet her. Amara watched as he embraced the woman warmly, almost too warmly, his hand lingering at her back longer than necessary. When he brought her over, he spoke with a certain pride, introducing her as Zinel, a business associate. The words sounded harmless, professional, even respectable, but the way Zinel's eyes lingered on him, the way her fingers brushed his arm while she laughed, it told another story entirely. Guests exchanged glances, some curious, some knowingly amused. Amara caught the whispers again, those quiet ripples of gossip that spread faster than music. She forced her smile wider, welcoming Zinel with grace, offering her a drink, acting as the perfect hostess. Inside, though, something cracked. The warmth she had carried all evening began to cool, replaced by a creeping unease she couldn't ignore. As the night carried on, Amara stood back for a moment, watching Chike's face, watching how alive he suddenly seemed in Zinal's presence. She had dreamed this night would be unforgettable, but not like this. And in the pit of her stomach, she already knew. Zinal's arrival was not an accident. It was a sign, and it carried the scent of betrayal. Dinner was served under the glow of fairy lights, the tables lined with candles and laughter floating across the garden. But for Amara, every moment at that table felt heavier than the one before. Chike sat close to Zinal, his body turned toward her as though no one else existed. He laughed at her jokes, leaned in to hear her whispers, and every so often his hand brushed against hers in a way that made Amara's chest tighten. Amara tried to keep her composure, smiling when spoken to, nodding politely, making sure guests felt at ease. But her eyes betrayed her, always drifting back to the two of them. She wanted to believe it was her imagination, that she was overthinking, that this was simply how colleagues behave. Still, the way his gaze lingered on Zinal told a story she didn't want to hear. Her best friend, Nia, noticed it immediately. Leaning close, Nia whispered, "Amara, are you seeing this? He's not even trying to hide it." Her words carried concern, almost anger, but Amara shook her head quickly. "It's nothing," she whispered back, her voice trembling. "He's just tired, maybe trying too hard to impress her for business." It was easier to lie to herself than to admit the humiliation rising in her throat. The moment that cut the deepest came when Chike raised his glass for a toast. Amara straightened, expecting to hear him speak of their love, their marriage, their 5 years together. But instead, his words were for Zinal. "To Zinal," he said with a proud smile, "a woman of brilliance, strength, and success. May we all learn from her courage." The guests clapped politely, glasses clinked, and Amara sat frozen, her hand tight around the stem of her untouched wine glass. Not a word about their anniversary. Not a word about her. Invisible. That was how she felt. On the night that was supposed to be hers, she was nothing more than a shadow at her own table, watching her husband shine a light on another woman. The laughter around her grew louder, the music played on, but inside, Amara's heart sank lower and lower. This was supposed to be her celebration, yet she had never felt so small. The music shifted into something slower, softer, the kind of song meant for couples to hold each other close. Guests began moving toward the dance floor, smiling, reaching for their partners. Amara's heart leapt with hope. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment Chike would finally look at her, take her hand, and remind her that this night was theirs. She smoothed her dress and turned toward him, but before she could even take a step, Chike was already moving. Not toward her, but toward Zinal. He extended his hand with a bold smile, and without hesitation, Zinal placed hers in his. Together, they walked onto the dance floor as if it belonged to them. Amara's breath caught in her throat. She sat frozen, her smile fading, her chest tightening with disbelief. The crowd went silent at first, the kind of hush that sweeps through when something feels out of place. Then whispers began, soft gasps rising like waves. Amara's eyes filled with tears as she watched her husband, pull Zinal close, his arm wrapped firmly around her waist. The music swelled, and before she could process what was happening, Chike tilted his head and kissed Zinal deeply, passionately, in front of every single guest. The sound of shock spread across the garden. Glasses clinked down onto tables, hands flew to mouths, phones shot up into the air to record what everyone knew would be remembered. Amara's world blurred. The twinkling lights, the music, the faces of the guests, it all faded into a haze of betrayal. She felt hot tears streaming down her cheeks, her body stiff, her heart breaking in real time. She wanted to scream, to run, to demand an explanation, but no words came. Her voice was gone, her strength swallowed by the sight of the man she loved choosing someone else. Not in secret, not in whispers, but boldly, cruelly, before a crowd that had gathered to celebrate their love. And as the phones captured every second, Amara knew this moment would live far beyond the. The kiss wasn't just between Chike and Zinal. It was a knife driven into her heart, with the whole world as witness. The kiss ended, but the damage didn't. The garden was no longer filled with music and laughter. It was filled with whispers. Some guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, avoiding Amara's eyes. A few quietly picked up their bags and slipped away, too ashamed to stay. Others stayed rooted in place, phones lifted high, eager to capture every second of the scandal that was unfolding like a cruel drama. The glow of camera flashes burned into Amara's skin, making her humiliation eternal. Her legs finally moved, shaky but determined, and she stepped toward Chike. Her voice broke as she tried to speak. "Chike, how could you on our night?" The words came out raw, pleading, desperate for an answer that might soften the wound tearing her apart. For just a moment, she hoped he would look at her and realize what he had done. But when he turned to her, his eyes were cold, hard, almost unrecognizable. With no hesitation, his voice cut through the stunned crowd. "You were never enough for me. The words struck harder than the kiss itself. It was as if the ground beneath her had crumbled, leaving her standing in the ruins of everything she believed in. Gasps rippled again through the guests, some covering their mouths in shock, others shaking their heads at his cruelty. But for Amara, the world blurred. Her chest felt hollow, her knees weak, her hands trembling. She had given him her loyalty, her love, her years. And in one sentence, he crushed it all like it meant nothing. Tears ran freely down her face, smudging her carefully applied makeup, but she no longer cared. The dream of a happy marriage, the illusion of love, shattered right there under the lights, in front of everyone. This was not just betrayal. This was destruction, raw and merciless. Amara stood in silence as the whispers swirled around her, as phones kept recording, as the man she once called her soulmate walked away with another woman. Her heart ached with a hopelessness, so heavy it felt impossible to breathe. The anniversary she thought would mark forever had instead buried her world in ashes. That night, the house felt heavier than ever. The laughter and music from the party were gone, replaced by a silence that pressed against Amara's chest. She sat on the edge of her bed, her dress still clinging to her body, the makeup smeared from tears she could no longer control. The mirror across the room reflected someone she barely recognized, a woman broken, humiliated, left with nothing but questions. Her mind replayed everything like a cruel film. The vows they had exchanged, the nights she stayed awake waiting for him, the time she put his dreams above her own, the sacrifices, the loyalty, the countless ways she had loved him without measure. And for what? For him to stand in front of the world and kiss another woman, as if she didn't exist. The whispers she had ignored for years came rushing back. The late nights, the excuses, the distance she had pretended not to see. Why had she closed her eyes to it all? Why had she convinced herself love was enough to hold him? Her heart whispered the question she was too afraid to answer. Did I love too much, or did he love me too little? The thought tore her apart, yet beneath the ache, something stirred. It was faint, like a small flame fighting against the wind, but it was there. For the first time, she began to see clearly. Maybe his betrayal was not the end of her, but the beginning of something else. The tears still fell, but behind them grew a quiet determination. Amara pulled the earrings from her ears, set them down gently on the table, and whispered to herself, I gave him everything, but now I give myself back to me. Her voice was cracked, but her words carried power. She didn't know how, and she didn't know when, but she knew one thing. This pain would not be the last chapter of her story. It would be the seed of her strength. A few days later, Amara found herself sitting in Nia's living room, her eyes still swollen from nights of crying. Nia, ever the fierce protector, placed a cup of tea in her hands and sat across from her. For a while, Amara stayed quiet, staring at the steam rising from the cup. I feel like my whole life ended that night, she finally whispered. Her voice cracked, the shame still heavy. Everyone saw it. The whole city is probably laughing at me. Nia leaned forward, her eyes sharp but kind. Amara, listen to me. He embarrassed himself, not you. That kiss may have broken your heart, but it freed your soul. Do you hear me? You're free now. Free from lies, free from a man who never valued you. The words struck Amara deep. She had been drowning in humiliation, convinced she had lost everything. But as Nia spoke, something inside her began to shift. She thought about it carefully. The kiss had shattered her, yes, but maybe it had also given her a chance to start over. A chance she never would have taken if she still believed in the illusion of their marriage. For the first time since that night, Amara let out a small laugh, bitter but real. So you're saying I should thank him? She asked. Nia smiled softly. Not thank him, but thank yourself for surviving him. And now you rebuild. With dignity. With strength. You don't hide in shame, Amara. You rise from it. Amara sat back, her heart beating faster. She pictured herself no longer as the woman frozen in tears while cameras flashed, but as someone who refused to be defined by betrayal. The thought of it sent a spark through her chest. Yes, she had been humiliated, but she was still standing. And standing meant she could rise. As she left Nia's house that evening, the sky above Lusaka glowed with a soft sunset. For the first time, Amara didn't feel crushed by the weight of what happened. She felt lighter, almost free. Her marriage was over, her heart was bruised, but her soul was just beginning to breathe. Months passed, and Amara was no longer the woman who had stood frozen on that dance floor. The pain was still there, yes, but she had learned to carry it differently. She poured her energy into something new, a women's empowerment initiative in Lusaka. What started as a small support group in her living room grew quickly into workshops, training programs, and a safe space for women who had faced betrayal, heartbreak, or silence. She was no longer just healing herself, she was helping others rise too. Then one day, the video of her anniversary night surfaced online. The shocking kiss, her tear-stained face, the cruel words Chike had thrown at her. It all spread across social media like wildfire. Amara braced herself for shame, expecting the world to laugh at her brokenness. But instead, something beautiful happened. People rallied to her side. Strangers filled her inbox with messages of love and encouragement. Women across Zambia shared their own stories of pain, saying her strength gave them courage. She wasn't mocked, she was embraced. With the wave of sympathy came opportunity. Investors reached out, organizations offered funding, and her small idea bloomed into a nationwide movement. Newspapers called her a symbol of resilience. Young women looked to her as proof that pain could be transformed into power. Amara walked into rooms where people now stood to applaud her, not pity her. And while she rose, Chike fell. His betrayal had not only been personal but public, and the business world no longer trusted him. One by one, partners withdrew, deals collapsed, his polished image crumbled. The man who once thrived on reputation was left with nothing but whispers of disgrace. Even Zinel, who had stood proudly at his side that night, quietly disappeared when his wealth and influence dried up. Amara never gloated, never wasted breath on revenge. She didn't need to. Her success was enough. What had been meant to destroy her had become her fuel. And with every new milestone, every woman she lifted, the sweetness of her comeback tasted richer than any vengeance could. Years later, the hall in Lusaka glowed with golden lights as leaders, entrepreneurs, and women from all walks of life gathered to honor Amara. She had become more than a name, she was a movement. Her Women's Empowerment Foundation had transformed lives across the country, and tonight she stood on stage, celebrated as a symbol of strength and resilience. The applause as she walked up was thunderous, the kind that made her heart swell with gratitude. Among the crowd, unnoticed by most, sat Chike. His suit was worn, his face aged with regret. Once admired, he was now a forgotten man, swallowed by the same scandal he thought would humiliate her. He watched from the shadows as the woman he had once dismissed stood radiant before the world, her head held high. Amara stepped to the podium, her voice steady, her eyes shining. "What was meant to humiliate me," she began, "became the fire that built me. I lost a husband, but I found myself." The hall went silent, every word sinking deep into the hearts of those listening. Some wiped tears, others nodded, knowing her pain and her triumph were bigger than her alone. Then she smiled, the kind of smile that came from healing, and delivered the line that would echo far beyond the room. "At our anniversary party, he kissed another woman, but today, I celebrate my true anniversary, the day I chose myself." The audience rose to their feet in thunderous applause, some crying openly, others recording the moment that would go viral with. And as the cheers filled the hall, Amara stood tall, no longer a woman defined by betrayal, but by victory. It was her night, her real anniversary, and this time, the world was celebrating with her.